Okay, class, so all that simplifying square roots and their operations are going to come to a head with solving quadratics. All right, and we're going to use square roots to solve these quadratics, so we had to know how to deal with them. All right, so solving quadratics using the square root method. Okay, so first thing, there is no x term. So when they're talking about an x term, we have a standard form for the quadratic. Okay, we've used this quite a bit already this year. Plus c. All right. Now, this bx term, all right, that is missing. All right, so when that is missing, okay, all we have is the x squared and some number. And when that happens, we can go ahead and use the square root method to solve this quadratic. We don't have to factor. Okay, so there we go. So if we look at this example here, okay, we have x squared minus 49 equals 0. Okay, notice there is no bx term, right? So in this part here, basically what you have is you have x squared plus 0x minus 49, right? 0 times x is just 0. It's missing b. The coefficient b is a 0. All right, so basically b equals 0. Okay, so it's gone. All right, and we got x squared minus 49, okay, equals 0. We're going to go ahead and solve this. So our first step is to isolate the x squared. That means we need this part here by itself. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to add the 49 to both sides of the equal sign, just like that. So negative 49, positive 49 will cancel. We'll bring down the x squared, and then 0 plus 49 is just 49. All right, so now that we have that, okay, step 2, we're going to take the square root of both sides. So once your square, which is the power 2, is isolated, we just square root both sides, and that's it. So we've got this x squared equals 49. Okay, and we're going to take the square root both sides. Okay, now what ends up happening is that square roots and power 2, or your square, are opposites of each other. And we know from algebra, when they're opposites, they annihilate each other, they cancel out. So this radical, the square root, will cancel out our power 2. And then we're just left with the x. Okay. Then of course, square root of 49 happens to be a perfect square, which means that it is a 7. Okay, square root of 49 is 7. All right, so if you remember your quadratics, right, it's a U shape, which means it can intersect your x-axis in 2 different places, all right, which means we get 2 solutions, guys. So what we have to keep in mind here is that we have a positive version of 7, and then its opposite, negative. So the answer is x equals plus or minus 7, or we can write it out like this: x equals 7 or x equals a negative 7. Okay, either one is fine. This is kind of a shorthand way of doing it. All right, so it's both of those. Okay, so a little bit as to why we're doing that. Okay, so when we take the square root of 49, we don't know what the original x is. So if we take 7 and we square that, that gives us 49. Okay, if we take a negative 7 and we square that, that also gives us a 49. We don't know which one. All right, so part of that reason, plus or minus 7, okay, takes care of both of those issues. All right, a couple of note when you're using your calculator. All right, so right here, I'm going to start this. Okay, so for your calculator, right, when you do negative 7 and then you square it, right, okay, your calculator only sees this part of it, okay, which it then is going to interpret it as a negative 1 times a 7 squared, which gives you a negative 49. Okay, this is wrong. All right, be careful when you're when you want to square a negative number in your calculator, you must write it with a parentheses. All right, that way what your calculator sees, it sees a -7 times another -7, which then becomes a positive 49. All right, and in that case, that is correct right there. Okay, so be very careful when you're trying to square a negative number. Put it in parentheses. All right, so on to some examples. All right, so if we look at example 1 here, we got x squared minus 16 equals 0. So we're going to simply follow the steps. First thing we want to do is isolate. We're going to add 16 both sides. Okay, cancels out. We get x squared equals 16. All right, then I'm going to square root both sides. Just like that. Okay, the power cancels out the square root. We get x by itself. The square root of 16 plus or minus 4. All right, moving on to number 2. All right, so x squared minus 7 equals 0. Same exercise, add 7 both sides. Those cancel out. You get x squared equals a positive 7. All right, then we're going to take the square root of both sides. Again, power 2 cancels out the square, and we're left with the x. And then since square root of 7 is already simplified, it's not a perfect square either, okay, we're just going to have square root of 7. But again, remember, since it's a square root, we're going to have to put plus or minus in the front of it, so it can be a positive square root 7 or a negative square root 7. Okay. All right, this one here. Okay, x squared plus 25 equals 0. Again, isolate by subtracting 25 both sides. Cancel that out. We got our x squared equals a negative 25. Okay, here we're going to have to be careful because now when we're ready to square root, we are now square rooting a negative number. Okay, left side of the equation doesn't change. We still get our x. However, we're going to square root a negative number. So remember, we need to simplify that. We need to pull that negative out as an I, and then it's going to be square root of 25. All right, so then of course 25 is a perfect square. We're going to get x plus or minus I square root of, not square root, excuse me, 5. Excuse me, square root of 25 is 5. And then the I goes behind it. Okay, so don't forget that plus or minus, guys. Okay, let's see, next problem. Okay, x squared plus 8 equals 88. Okay, doesn't have to equal a 0. You can still work with this. Subtract the 8 both sides, just like so. We're going to get x squared equals 88 minus 8 is 80. All right, great. Okay, isolated, we'll square root both sides. Okay, again, power gets rid of the square root, and we're left with x. Okay, now 80 can be simplified. All right, so if you take that 80, that's square root 80, break down that 80. Okay, 8 and 10. Okay, 8 can then break down to 4 and 2. That 4 can break down to 2 and 2, and 10 breaks down to 2 and 5. All right, so then we're going to look for pairs. All right, so we got a pair of 2's, another pair of 2's, and then a single 5. All right, so again, every pair of 2's, we're going to write 1, 2 in its place in front of the radical. So just from our simplifying lesson, so we got 2 here, and then another 2 to represent the other pair, and then all the single numbers will go on the inside. It's 5. Then if we multiply this out, we get 4 square root of 5. All right, so we're going to simplify square root of 80 as plus or minus 4 square root 5. Just like so. All right. All right, let's look at this example here. Okay, so a lot to do here. This x squared is by all means not isolated at all. Okay, so let's see. First thing we're going to do, let's get rid of 108 by adding 108 to both sides. All right, cancels out. You get 3x squared equals a positive 108. All right, our next step, divide by 3 to get these to divide out. Okay, so 108 divided by 3 will give us put in my calculator here, 36. Oh, it's gonna be nice and easy. Okay, then of course what we're going to do is we are going to take the square root to both sides. All right, again, power 2 cancels out square root, and we're going to be left with x. Okay, square root of 36 plus or minus 6. Pretty easy. All right, last example. So I think it is. Okay, so again, x squared definitely not isolated. Got it equal to a negative 30. No problem. Let's go ahead and add 6 both sides. Just like so. I'm going to get negative 8 x squared equals a negative 24. Okay, negative 30 plus 6, negative 24. We'll then divide both sides by a negative 8 so that we can get those two to divide out. All right, and then negative 24 over a negative 8 is going to be a positive number, okay, and that's going to be 3. 3 times 8 is 24. Okay, square root both sides. All right, and again, square root cancels out power 2. And we're going to get an x. All right, and what is the square root of 3? We can't simplify that, so it's simply just a plus or minus square root 3. All right, so pretty easy way to solve quadratics. We didn't have to use any x method. It was pretty much just a couple of 1 to 2 step equations. All right, class is over.